Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Digital Artcast. Firing high off the heels of the last one. I think really people enjoyed and engaged with Darren's, kind of talk and what he was aiming on about the state of the industry. But we're kind of zeroing back into our kind of bread and butter on the podcast, which is artists and developers in the games industry. Artists specifically for this episode. Someone who's joining the 2x Club because this will be his second appearance on the podcast. Yeah. We're bringing in today a concept artist, environment artist, art director, man of many talents, Mr. Tim Kaminski. He's coming back to the podcast. Hello, Tim. How are you doing?
Hello. How's it going? It's glad to be back. It feels like it's been like a whole chapter of my life that has gone by since we've last talked. It feels maybe even longer than it actually was, but I suppose there's been a lot happening since we last talked in the podcast.
If you think about it, so we last talked in 2018, I think, was like...
Yeah, it's a completely different world now.
Yeah, like, because that was even post-COVID. It was post, like, most things in America, to be fair, like, and yeah, it just feels like, especially now with the layoffs, like, and the way the industry is now, like, the landscape 6 years later, it's...
Yeah, it feels a little bit like a landmine with the landmine field with all the different layoffs and everything happening everywhere.
So the last time we got you on, I think you were just like almost like on the cusp of leaving where you were originally to go live in LA and work at Wonderstorm. Where are you from originally again?
Originally I'm from Michigan, but I've jumped around. I've been everywhere. I've been like lived in Chicago and Georgia. I think the last where I was before was South Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I think when we talked, I had literally just moved. I remember being in my new apartment.
Yep.
And we had a chat. I think I was in El Segundo in LA.
Right.
It was right down the road from my studio that I just had joined, Wonderstorm.
And now you've left Wonderstorm. So can you tell the guys really quickly where you are now and what you're doing?
Yeah. Now I'm at Robot Entertainment, working on a new project. Robot Entertainment, they've been most known for Orcs Must Die franchise, and they've got 3 of those out. And actually, technically, there was 4. But yeah, 3 games. And then previously, the studio mostly came from Ensemble Studio. So it was like your Age of Empires and Age of Mythology. So kind of a lot of those core people from that team are the leadership at Robot Entertainment now. Like they all worked on those games and kind of split off and created Robot. And I think there was some other studios that split off from Ensemble at that point.
And what are you doing there currently?
I am the art director on a new project that we're working on. Really excited to get it released and everything. We'll probably be announcing that next while.
At one point,
at one point in time, I can't really say.
It will come out at some point. Yeah, let PR handle that.
Yeah. You'll see me probably messaging all over my socials, which I haven't been too active on lately because I've been quite busy with life and art and art directing and work and such.
I mean, I think just the roller coaster you've been on the last couple of years, I think you've just almost retreated inwards and took some time to yourself, right?
Yeah, I before I was pretty active on social media and stuff like that, and I took a step back. I felt like it wasn't like I was
serving you well,
not in a good space mentally, and my mental health wasn't in a great space. So I kind of took a step back and kind of refocused on just enjoying my life a little bit more, because I think my work-life balance and social media life balance was a little bit off. So I started to just appreciate, sometimes not doing things for a little bit, which I'm pretty bad at. I usually always try to do something.
You're knee deep in stuff, try to get things done.
Yeah. Even when I take a break from doing things, I'm always like, I find another thing to kind of like tackle on to. Like when if I'm not drawing, I got a piano, so now I'm learning music and I play piano and stuff.
I was just thinking that's funny though, because we were literally just talking about that the other week, because we've been friends for so long. I was talking about, you were looking to get your teeth into something again, and I was like, oh yeah, my servers, they're a small indie dev, like they could use help. And you're like, oh yeah, like I'll totally art direct another project or I'll help with another thing. But like, yeah, so it's, I know it is a difficult balance, and the thing we'll probably dive into is, how social media is affecting us as artists, how I feel like it has changed. And, we don't have to do the usual bullshit, like, because we've talked to you about your career. That was the whole thing in 2018. We talked about where you came from, you're in the dev scene and building your own games and then getting into what you do.
Yeah.
So it's a thing now where we look at how the landscape has changed. Now, socials in general, I think it's like a dumpster fire at the moment. There's Instagram, Facebook, and everything else. I can name them all, but I'd be here all day.
There's
It
so many
feel-
of them. Yeah. It's like
yeah,
hard to
there's
know which one to use. And
the reach as well. I mean, I've seen people who have like 1 million followers on their account, and their posts are averaging like maybe like 50,000 likes, engagement, something like that. Maybe 100,000 at a push.
yeah, I seen a dramatic drop in engagement. And I don't know if it's accurate numbers, but I
Mhm.
guess the internet is like what, 30% humans and the rest is not. So I
Robots,
kind of
yeah.
think bots have taken over a lot of these
Someone talked
platforms.
about that about Facebook, and they were talking about how because there's so many bot accounts on Facebook through various means, but mostly political stuff, where, as we well know now, how Russia was involved with the American government's you're setting up with the whole thing with Trump.
Yeah.
It's a thing where like you find some sites and some groups where it's like bots answering questions and then bots answering those questions, but in a direct response that's opposite. So then they're fighting with each other, and then it's this endless chain of people
Yeah.
fighting with bots, bots fighting with people.
It makes it look
Um,
like this whole thing's happening, and it's just bots arguing over stuff.
yeah,
But one of the things, I know, a little bit of a tangent for AI, but when it
mhm,
was starting to come out, I was like, oh, it's probably going to start eating and consuming itself.
yeah,
And Facebook is a great example of seeing that, because there's like
yep,
bots posting images that are created by bots that look, they don't even like look believable, but
yeah.
bots are liking them. So it's like this weird circle of just chaos and
I think
nonsense.
it's a positive for us as artists, because what I feel like the loop is going to end up doing is, because we talked about this when we had Darren on in the last episode, where if you look at where the people have landed in AI, it's the same people that came from NFTs and then moved to crypto and
Yeah,
then
that's true.
moved
Well,
to AI. So it's like the snake oil thing. It's like, I think because that is essentially going to, like you said, the snake eating its own tail. It's the thing of people will get so burnt out in that stuff that in like a year or two, they will really seek out people like yourself and me and other people who like make good content.
yeah, that's kind of what I hope, is that people get tired of things that aren't made by humans, and
Mhm.
then it brings back around that like need for humans. It might be a little while. Usually those cycles seem like they're like 10, 20, and 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe sometimes 5, like seems like things kind of speed up
I
along
think
those.
people are just burnt out in the internet. Like, I think the whole thing is like being online, especially during COVID, because that's all you could do. You had to be inside. You had to be online because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
Um, and Darren talked about it as well, and he was, he's a recruiter. I'm not saying he's not an artist and what he does, but like he in recruitment even knew that the thing that AI was lacking, and where we like I clapped at the end. He was like, it has no soul. It has no like warmness
Yeah.
to it. And I was like, yeah, like it is missing that human element. That's the thing that makes it art, is the soul of the thing that you pour into the
Yeah,
work
it's
you're
the
doing.
experiences of the individual and their life and the elements they instill in that. Like when I'm working with a team, like I try to draw that out as much as I can. Like I don't want to like be like, oh, it's got to be just like this. I kind of leave a open area of like, oh, what can you do? And then I always get surprised in great ways where it's like, oh, that's a really great idea, or like they'll put some of themselves in there or the knowledge that they know from where they came from. So you always have like a unique perspective. And just because you know everything from like
Mhm.
a AI side doesn't mean it's going to be better. Let alone the purpose of like concept art and stuff isn't being solved by AI. It's problem solving, spatial awareness, and things like that that
Yeah.
don't get resolved at
So,
all.
as of the time we're recording this, Feng Zhu has just put out a huge video, like an hour and a half long, of how AI will not steal your jobs, because he sees that it can make the pretty picture at the moment, but it
Yeah.
can't do the problem solving aspect of taking like a vertical slice of something and then breaking it apart into like, well, how does this function? How does the door open? How does the hinge? Like, because it's like you can't hand a landscape painting to a 3D artist and be like, go. They'll be like, right, this is cool, but how does this thing work? How does this thing, when you turn it around, like, like even stuff like
Yeah.
turnarounds where people have. I remember talking to two concept art students 3 weeks ago, and I was reviewing their portfolio, and I said, you've got a lot of like what we call keyframe shots or key shots, where it's like, you're looking at the landscape thing. And I
Yeah.
think obviously with stuff like films, that usually plays a big part because you want a good visual identity in what you're going to
Yeah. Like
film.
establishing shots and stuff.
Yeah. But with games, because everything's so functional driven, everything has to have a function and a drive. I was like, this is cool that you built this weapon, but like, and the render shots are really cool and lights and stuff. your camera lots and stuff like that. But like, how does the reload chamber work? Like, how does the thing, how do they get the clip in? Does the sight turn it round? Can this bit be taken off? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And I was like, maybe if you'd done like a 3/4 as well, and maybe like showed the bit with the guardrails on, because that would be hard to model. You may want to break that bit apart and maybe like pull it off the model, done a whole like thing, like stuff like that. They're just not thinking about, and that's the thing where people, I think, through art books and ArtStation have been like almost poisoned, because they think like this now, that's what concept art is.
Yeah, there's a lot of people think illustration is concept art, so they fill their portfolio with like really beautifully rendered, immaculate illustrations, like character illustrations and things like that. But it's like, oh, it's these aren't really the like nitty gritty kind of sketches and ideas and process, and
nothing that would feed into a pipeline, basically.
No, and then like for like an environment side, like our environment concept artists work so closely with the art team too,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, oh, I did this concept, and then like the 3D artist will block it out and be like, well, how does that feel from like the player's perspective when they run around? And it becomes a feel thing. Like there's the composition elements as well, but it kind of comes down to like, oh, if the player is going to be playing in the space when they look up or down or over here, what do they see? How do we draw their attention? And right now AI can't do any of that stuff. So
yeah, that's definitely a weak point, especially when it comes to things like level design, because that's like a whole other department that takes over from stuff like that and then makes the space playable, interactable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The big thing I see, I know we're probably got a tangent AI. Big thing
No,
I see though
no.
is people that don't understand art
Mm-hmm.
being like, use AI.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, you don't understand the purpose of this. Like you're so far removed from it, and the artists are so deep into it that they can't even hardly talk to each other or understand each other, where it's like, oh yeah, look, it made beautiful pictures, you could use it. It's like, yeah, it makes beautiful pictures, but like
Not functional.
they're not functional. And on top of that, like the legitimacy of it, like
Of making
kind of
something like
don't know
that.
if like in a few years, if like a band hammer will fall down and be like, oh, all of that content is actually theirs.
Yeah.
Which is hopefully what will happen. But
yeah. It's thinking back to even the thing that I was talking about back in like, oh god, like 2014 or something, when people used to say that they would open art books and look at concept art, as we now know it as marketing art. But like, yeah, like people would look at those big establishment shots and say, oh yeah, concept art, like the blue sky stuff. And I'm like, I mean, maybe like in the first, I don't even know, like 3 months of a project, maybe you're making like big bold strokes where it's like, this is kind of what the thing will look like. Maybe I'll have a purple sky, green grass, whatever. But then after that, you then have to dig into the hard bit, which is like, right, atmosphere, how does it feel, what inhabits the world, what the creature's like. Yeah, that's the stuff that, again, we talked about this yesterday, how a lot of these AI guys think that an idea man is a job in the industry.
Yeah.
When it's
Everybody's
really
got
not.
ideas, but who could like coordinate and implement, discuss, and communicate those ideas?
Yeah, even ideas wise, I mean, like you can always raise your hand and put your input, but by the time the creative director has got past that point of making the game design document, like a lot of stuff is pretty established. You're not going to be throwing even more stuff on top of it unless it really needs it.
Yeah,
So,
and usually the idea people, it ends up becoming scope creep, and it's like, well, we have a team size of this, it's going to cost us this much, we have this much time, and yeah, like you're saying, the blue sky stuff, like that's all the pre-production, but happens pretty quickly. Some projects are pre-production longer, but usually you go roll right into production, and then you're immediately like, oh, here's level blockouts, we've got to make these look like this, and
start making texture passes and stuff like
that.
Yeah,
you're not making like beautiful pictures and stuff. Like once in a while, you'll have some time where be like, oh, let's render this one out as kind of like a shot to show the team to get them
for like
excited.
Advertising as well, you might put it out in your socials or something and say, here's a sneak peek at something we're making. Yeah,
a lot of times it's just for internal at first to kind of get people excited,
so
and
the
then
team
you'd be
gets an
like,
idea. Yeah,
and then you could be like, oh, we'll use this piece later for maybe marketing, we might
something
render it up
else,
a little bit more. But
and then even then, like a something like you, or I mean the art director, but like a production artist would probably spend like a good couple hours just making it even better, like making it a bit more believable, a bit more like, oh, here's like birds for scale, stuff like that.
Birds for scale. I literally did that the other day. Like I was taking a screenshot of some of our levels, and I was like, these look really great, but
and it
we
needs
haven't
birds
had
for
time.
scale.
We haven't had time for the VFX artist to get in there and give us some birds for scale yet. So I was just like, bloop, 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 little W's and V's, and and I didn't even notice it after a little bit. Everyone's just like, yeah, there's birds in there.
You think about how the way back in, the things we used to think about even in production, where birds for scale and round brush and stuff, is how far we've come now. But
Stickman, birds for scale.
Yeah, indeed. So But yeah, so I mean, you were doing Wonderstorm and you were working on Dragon Prince. Now, obviously, decisively, I don't know if we ever clarified this, but you weren't working on the TV series, right? It was just the game.
I worked on both. I did stuff mostly it
Hmm.
was the game, but I also did work for like pre-production stuff for other ideas that were run through the pipe because Wonderstorm had quite a few various ideas and like other shows they're pitching for other studios. So I would inevitably do concept art for those.
Right.
I did a lot of the posters for the show. Like I think the
Yeah, the
first
one
few
that's on the wall,
seasons.
the one that a lot of people see with the big dragon thing.
Yeah,
On the
yeah. There's
yeah.
yeah. I've got it. Like I guess I can move my camera. There's right
Oh
up
wow.
there. I've got. So I did that one, and I think
You
I did
forget we
like.
have technology, Tim. I can just insert a picture here.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Just drop
Oh
a
no,
game
my
egg.
camera's all messed up. No,
Yeah, you're good.
that is a
You're good.
little messed up though. But yeah, so I did a lot of that stuff, and then
Hmm.
there was the big dream. There was kind of to link the different multimedias, so taking show and game and kind of linking them together. We tried to do that a good bit with some success, and probably the most success we had though was working on board games and stuff that kind of fit between the two. So
Oh,
we
okay.
create new characters, and I worked on those too. I art directed the. Um, I got it somewhere around here. I'll have to figure out the name later, but it was like we did a few board games. We
Hmm.
had like a D&D campaign book and stuff like that. For it wasn't D&D official rules, but it was another subset of rules like
Right.
Cortex or
Okay.
something. And those were pretty cool because they actually did link back into the game. We were going to make characters in the game and stuff. And
Okay.
then for the game, the teaser trailer was released. I guess maybe like I don't know how long ago now. Maybe like 6 months or something like that.
Yeah, sometime last year. I think it was popular.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe last year sometime. But yeah,
But then, I mean, it's one of these things where, like, at least they give you the experience to do what you're doing now, which you've moved to a studio that you're doing
yeah,
something in a
yeah.
similar vein, but you've had that lot of experience. Because before then, you hadn't done much in the way of art direction heavily in a studio before, right?
I had done let's see 20. So I'd worked at a few studios at that point. One
It's
was a
funny we were talking
mobile.
about the whole Ready Dawn thing as well, right? But you weren't doing art direction there, right? It was
No, Ready Dawn was that was all concept stuff. But then I did art direction for there was a educational game I worked on
right,
that it didn't get released. There was issues there. Well, they had technically there's two art directors, which
right.
was lots of
I mean, you've got
disagreements,
a
I
bunch of
guess.
stuff here. Like you've got DreamWorks, Ready Dawn, Network, Pocket Games, Access Animation, all
Yeah,
these
yeah.
studios.
Yeah. And there was another art direction. Oh, and also worked. There was another mobile studio I worked for doing art direction. It was Network in the with a three for the E. So I worked there for a
Yeah,
little while too. But honestly, most of the studios that I worked at wasn't a great culture fit for me. And finding like a good culture fit was something I didn't look at as much early on in my career. Like I was sort of just like, oh, cool job, cool project, or just cool job at the beginning, or just job early on.
I mean, that's how you are when you start your career, though. You're just looking for
Yeah,
those big tent poles.
anything.
Like, yeah,
Yeah,
I just want to
just
work on
kind of like
something, want to be cool. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
any
Reddit
step
Dawn in it.
up.
Yeah, I mean, Reddit Dawn in itself were a really great studio as well, especially
Oh
like
yeah, that was
America.
super fun. Like doing the
Yeah,
concept art for them was really fun. And there was some other like I worked for Playful for a while, and they had some really cool concepts I did, but
Access as
they've
well,
never
because I mean,
seen the
Access
light
are a
of
huge
day.
studio. I mean, they're in Glasgow, they're over here, so like, yeah, it's
Yeah, I worked on like for Access. I did. I think some stuff might have got released, but most of the projects for Access were,
shelved.
uh, yeah, shelved. There, all these projects that I didn't get to share any of the
Happens. I mean, they're an
stuff.
outsourcing studio, so it's
That's
very rarely.
happens
Yeah,
so
it's
much. Yeah,
very rare that they get to even show a lot of their work when you work at their studios because a lot of the people you're working for will say, well, we don't really want you to release stuff. We just want you to work on the third party vendor stuff and then just
yeah. And a lot of times they're doing pitches, I think, for other people too, where it's like,
yeah, mobile
and
game
so
stuff
then
as well, trailers for mobile games or
yeah,
other things. They've got like Clash of Kings and stuff like that, and Clash Royale and do loads of stuff for that as well. That I know people do stuff. So
yeah.
yeah, they're a very multifaceted studio. They do a lot of stuff. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, like it's one of these things where at least that, like you said, it gave you that experience and it gave you that perspective on what you're doing now. If you go into a studio
Oh
setting,
yeah. Even even studios that like weren't the best experience, like I learned so much from them, and I kind of people have asked me like, "Oh, who's your mentor for art direction stuff?" And a lot of times my answer is just like, "Well, I all the bad experiences I did, I just do the opposite of that and like try to
seems to work
focus."
out.
Yeah, I try to focus on people most, and I've always seen everyone always focusing too much. I guess maybe not too much on the art, but just not enough on the people.
Yeah, of course.
And it feels like being an art director is just kind of like, it's a lot about the people. It's like making sure like you have a good relationship with them, that you trust them, they trust you,
They
and
have the tools
it's,
to do their job. You can get out of the way of
yeah,
them.
you want them to feel safe when they're doing stuff, like to bring new ideas to you, and not be shut down and stuff like that, just off for no reason.
I mean, it's always a thing, even just in management in general, not within art, but like managers are supposed to be good managers. Are supposed to be the people who really just give you the tools to do your work and get out of the way. It's just like, is there
Yeah, yeah,
anything I can be doing for you? Anything I can help you with? And like, sure, as long as you're doing your
yeah. A
stuff.
lot of times, my job is like more heavy on the pre-production side, getting like the kind of established look, and then from there,
Mhm,
it's more like just maintaining it and building everybody up and being like, oh, let's have some feedback here to get that quality bar way up there,
mhm.
or just like maintaining the look and stuff. So
Yeah,
it's,
yeah, yeah. Which
but
is, I mean, it's one of these things. I think when you get to the level you have, is that it's the T we were talking about, but it's sometimes where like you'll either go the art direction route, which is essentially management and constraint of the ideology and the vision, or you go principle, which is more just like you
yeah,
continue to make art, basically.
yeah. When I was younger, I think I assumed I'd do the principal side for quite a while and then go off and teach,
Hmm.
but I ended up getting pulled into the
Art
art director
direction stuff.
side and really liking it. I like uh, I like people, I guess,
People.
and working with
Yeah.
artists. Like I ended up liking people more than I thought I did.
Yeah. No, I'm the same. Like, I mean, it definitely was initially in my career making a lot of stuff and working for studios. It was the whole thing of like making a bunch of art, but I think always community has been a big thing for me, like with the podcast and with the Discord and like
Yeah, yeah,
loads of other stuff that I've done. Like one of these things in the industry that people really realize early on is that I'm very well known in the industry. There's a load of high up people in the industry that know who I am and know me by name and would know me to talk to me, but it's not my work that's ever carried my name. It's been the podcast. It's been the sociable side of me. It's been like just interacting with people. The fact I can go up to anybody and talk to them, like walking up to Raf
yeah.
and THU and talking to him and getting his
That's
contact details and yeah.
that's a tough skill to have. Like I'm not that great at that aspect. Like
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
I'm
think when you're an extrovert in this industry, you're kind of king of the nerds because, like, you know,
that's true. I'm pretty far on the introvert, maybe ambivert side, so I
yeah,
tend to.
you've got a good
That's
middle
actually
ground, I
probably one of the
think.
tougher parts.
Yeah,
Was
yeah,
that?
you've got a good middle ground where, like, you're
That's
not
what I try.
quite,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not quite like just in your shell all the time because you kind of can't be as introverted when you're an art director because you have to interact with so many people.
No,
So
that was the biggest thing for me to overcome is because I like when I was young, I was super introverted, like barely could kind of talk to people type thing, and so it was such a learning experience of just shifting over and getting into art direction roles
getting
and
to know people and talk to them and yeah,
being like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a meeting with 30 whatever
people.
people, and realizing sitting there at the meeting and being like, oh, I guess I'm in charge of this, aren't I?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Sometimes that the weight of that, or just like the social anxiety that can come with that, can be pretty tough to get over. But any introverts out there, like you can do it if you just
Oh
just go to your
yeah.
therapy and just build yourself
I
up to it.
mean, even me to an extent, but I think I was so scared as a kid to talk to people. I think I almost forced myself just to talk to people, like
Oh, that's what I
blurt.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
I think,
I had a hard time like looking people in the eye and stuff. Like I was so
yeah.
shy. It's like, oh.
I know it's funny when we think back now and I look at a lot of the TISM spectrum, and you're always looking at like, oh, eye contact. That's a total thing. Oh, right, okay, yeah. Like the more you delve into those
Yeah.
ADHD stuff as well, you're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And oh
There's too
god,
many
man,
things that I feel like, oh, that all applies to me. It's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah. Reading through the symptoms, and you're like, oh my god.
yeah, it's like, oh,
Yeah, oh
maybe
well,
there's more
that
to
explains a
this
lot
than
of things. So yeah.
yeah,
Oh god, it's funny though when you
yeah,
see people going through that whole, because I'm going through it just now, the whole diagnosis thing, and when you get to that official thing, people talk about like the psychologist says like, "Oh yeah, I think you have ADHD or whatever," and you're like, you feel robbed. You feel like you look back at every interaction you've ever had with a friend or a relationship, and you're like, "Oh, no wonder,
you're
like
like,
no
God
wonder I was
explains
like
all
that."
of it.
It explains so much stuff. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
like it's definitely hard for me to make and keep friends, but I think it's also what I've realized is it's hard to keep normie friends. Like it's hard to have people who aren't like you, who are maybe like somewhere on the spectrum, I don't know, but like,
yeah,
the people
yeah.
who have the interests outside of like the normal stuff and like are quite geeky about that thing. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Neurodivergent people are like, it's so easy for me to befriend neurodivergent people, but neurotypical people, I do have a harder time. I
yeah.
think it's like, I think the
It's the
topics I
overshare,
like to
right? That's the thing I always
discuss
find
and
is the overshare is like when you talk way too much about something or you get like really enthusiastic and you get over excited about what you're talking about.
yeah,
And then 5 minutes in, you're like, oh shit, like, I need to stop
And then
talking.
I love that though, because like for me, I'm just like, oh look, I'm learning all this stuff. I'm
Yeah,
getting to know this
keep talking. Like I
person.
love
I
it.
get so
Yeah,
excited about that stuff. So it's like, oh yeah, go
people have
deep
a
in it.
niche thing. Like it's,
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of my, I say friends, like more an acquaintance at this point, but they were coming by to see the new flat we moved into, and they were looking at my art book collection. They were like, "Oh my god, that's a lot of books." I was like, "Oh yeah, they're concept art books." And he's like, "Oh yeah, concept art." So so there was a whole 5 minute rant on what concept art was, even though he didn't really want to know. He was
Yeah.
like, "All right, okay, cool. So art for
I
games,
see
yeah,
that
yeah,
you didn't
basically,
ask, but let me tell you all about
yeah, yeah, yeah."
it.
And then it's like, "Oh, but I've got this one. You really," and I was like pulling out the books and like, "Check this one. This is really," and he was like, "Oh, that's really," like trying to be probably polite and be like, "Oh, cool, yeah."
Yeah. But you find another neurodivergent person, and they're just like, yeah, let me
Like,
soak
oh
it
my god,
up.
show me more. Like,
Yeah,
how many?
yeah.
What's your favorite top 10? Give me my top 10. And
Yeah. I love
um,
hearing about people's special interest.
oh yeah. Well, it's the thing because we have so many. It's like a thing of when people say, "Do you have a hobby?" I'm just like, yes,
Of course. Yeah. Do I have a hobby? Yes, I have
yes,
too many hobbies.
many hobbies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Um, but like even the fact that it was like the Ratchet and Clank art book from Insomniac, and it was like, oh yeah, I think I've ever played that. And I was like, oh my god. And when I first met my partner that I'm with now, I think I went on like an hour rant about, because she wanted to get to know me, so she was talking about video games. She's like, "So what's your favorite video game?" And for me, that's like, I mean, obviously Zelda, but then it's like there's so many games in the world that like,
yeah. Like,
I
what's this
love.
one? And plus this one, and
Yeah.
plus this one. And yeah,
And
it
she was like, "Oh
listens
yeah,
to.
because like she was a big fan of the Twilight books growing up, so she loves vampires." So I was like, "Oh well, actually, I played this game back in the day, Legacy of Kane, which was also Soul Reaver.
I
It's a
played that
huge."
too.
And
Those
then I
are pretty
tried.
great.
I think for like an hour, I basically laid out the whole synopsis of like 6 games of like how the story arc went on Legacy of Kane, because it's so
Yeah.
cool. Because he does
You'll have to
this,
tell
and
me
then
that sometime because I
he goes
don't. I
back
don't
in
remember.
time and he meets Janice Audron, who's the first vampire, and you find out how they were cursed. And but I mean, I honestly hope Crystal Dynamics bring that game back because oh
That
my
would
god.
be. I could see they could do a really good job. Like bring that back. I could
They're
see.
talking about doing it. They put out a survey not too long ago, and the whole survey that I answered was like, I think it was like 30 questions on concise points like what would you want to see in a sequel, like
Yeah.
what bits would matter most to you, like would it be story, character, combat, like um but like say like
Exploration and adventure. I think if they like really
yeah,
push
those
that,
games are
that'd be
always
so
big on that
fun.
as well. And
And the story. The
yeah, of
story
course.
was always really great. Like just the
Well,
kind of
originally written
rise and
by
fall.
Amy Hennig, who
Oh, were
went
they?
yeah
Oh, I didn't
who went
realize
on to
that.
write
Yeah.
Uncharted. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, cool. Yeah,
yeah, that was her.
that makes
She was at
sense.
Silicon Knights early on, and they wrote the story for that.
I
So,
didn't know that. Oh, that's really cool. Yeah,
oh
Silicon Knights isn't around anymore, though, is it?
no,
Is it?
they went a long time ago.
Yeah,
They
there
died
was a yeah. I remember there's
because there was a
some
whole
engine
war when they
issues.
made Soul
That
Reaver by transferring the rights to from Silicon Knights to was it Crystal Dynamics at the time? I can't remember if it was them or Eidos. It was one of them anyway, and they were trying to. There was a war for the rights basically to make Soul Reaver, to take the IP of Legacy of Kain and move it across to
I think what
Soul
the
Reaver.
final nail in the coffin though was they used Unreal Engine or something for some game, and then they were saying it wasn't using that, or it was like it was called like
I
human
forget the
something,
yeah.
something like that. But yeah.
One of the guys I know in Edinburgh, he worked on a reboot they initially started, but then it was like low key stuff, like he was making keyframes, like really early stuff, and then it basically
Oh,
didn't get made.
yeah.
But they allowed him to put it in his ArtStation, so I got to see like I'll maybe send it to you one point a bit of like the original ideas they were thinking about. I don't think it was a continuation of Soul Reaver. I think it was something else. But this is what I'm talking about with
Yeah.
diversion to the lore of
You're like,
Legacy
well,
of Kain.
here's a yeah.
Yeah,
We'll go deep into that because I was a pretty big fan of those games. So
yeah. I mean, the story in general, like if you didn't really take in the gameplay of all the hours have to play it, but the story arc in general is really interesting,
oh,
especially because
it's
now
fantastic.
it deals with like time dilation and like multi-dimensional stuff. It's like stuff we're not
Yeah, and
talking
like
about now in films, but it
phasing
was way
between
back in
worlds
the
and
day.
stuff. And then also it had the like intro cinematic or whatever for the first one had one of my favorite like voice actors. He was like this older guy, Joe something.
Oh yeah,
Really deep, awesome voice. Like
is that the first Soul Reaver cinematic when he's like I am Raziel and they're like zooming in on the
yeah, I think so. Or it's like the narrator guy that's sort of like
yeah.
the god or something like that. But yeah.
Oh yeah, the funny thing is a lot of the voice actors for that game. We're just going to dive into a 10-minute segment about Soul Reaver, by the way, guys. So just stick around. But, there was a whole bunch of really old actors because voice acting at the time wasn't like it is now, with like a lot of younger people or people who at the time were younger got in it. it was a lot of old English voice actors they bought from like stage and screen to do
Yeah, it
the
was
readings.
for this one. It was he was from like the History Channel. Like he did a bunch of History Channel
Right. Yeah,
narrations. So
probably. Yeah, yeah. There was
yeah,
a bunch of people in that. Even the guy who played Raziel at the time was fairly young. I think he was in his maybe early 40s, but he's kind of lived off that for a while because I've done a
mm,
bunch after that as well.
yeah.
The same guy, like the feel of like Ratchet and Clank, because the guy who does Ratchet's voice was the same guy who done Titus, I think it was in Final Fantasy X.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah,
So he got a bunch of work off that as well. But yeah, the games industry has definitely changed, and it now works must die because, like, obviously, we talked about how you've not really worked as much on the games, but like you guys have like this protagonist thing now, and it's a whole thing with him as well. He's a whole character, and yeah, it's been a whole thing of like the main characters getting this whole like large of life and almost like animated stuff like from animated movies. It's becoming a thing now in games, and
yeah.
so yeah, but like I mean, you went from back on track. You you went from Wonderstorm and working on Dragon Prince, and Dragon Prince, of course, the story was great, and a lot of the guys who worked on that were the original team who worked on Avatar: Last Airbender and done stuff for that as
Yeah, like
well.
had like Aaron Ehasz and stuff was one of the
Yeah,
founders of the studio. It was really great working with him on some of
yeah.
the
The
writing
voice
and
of
stuff like
Sokka
that.
originally, who
Yeah,
then was
yeah.
on Dragon Prince as well. Um, but then yeah, so you left Wonderstorm and then went to um, Robot Entertainment, who are doing Numbers Must Die. Was that a thing where they reached out to you, or did you reach out to them?
So this is actually the first. So I don't know if I talked about this before, but all my all my previous jobs I didn't apply for.
Right,
Like people
because you're
came
too
to me.
fucking good. That's what it is.
Well, the reason that happened was it was more because I was so shy and bad at interviewing. So I was like,
Right,
I'll just make a really cool portfolio that speaks for me, and it
right,
it
yeah.
worked out. And but this job I had a friend of mine. She reached out to me, and she was actually working at Robot Entertainment as well, and thought it might be a good fit. They were looking for a new art director, and I was looking kind of for a new studio, a new cultural environment, everything like that.
Because you talked
And
even about how LA at the time you weren't really digging like the LA vibes as well.
early vibes of
No, the LA, Los Angeles, in
oh
general.
oh
Yeah,
well I love LA, but there's some aspects of LA where a lot of people you meet in LA, probably not the LA natives, but the people that moved to LA,
yeah. Because nobody in LA
they
is from LA.
yeah, there's like I have the best friends I've made in LA are LA natives, which are kind of harder to find and
Right.
all
Yeah.
neurodivergent,
Yeah. Of
obviously.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
But it kind of feels like in LA, everyone that looks at you, they don't see a person, but they see a ladder that they can climb to get to somewhere
Something
else.
else.
It's like, oh, you're a fine ladder. Like the the amount of times where I'd be talking to people and they'd be treating me like a human, and then they would ask like, "Oh, what do you do?" Which is such a common LA question.
Yeah.
Which I mean, it's a general question too. Like I like to hear
Yeah.
what people are doing too.
But now
But
thinking about how we think about society is kind of like a weird thing to then be like, because you judge people solely on what they do for work, right? It's weird.
yeah, and like to me, when I ask that question, I'm just like, oh, I want to know what you're into and what
Generally
you
just
like to do.
interested. Yeah.
Yeah. But when it's asked in LA, it kind of means like it's like, oh, are you a ladder I can climb? And I've been at like Halloween parties and stuff, and people are like, oh, what do you do? And then they go from like kind of like disregarding you or despising you to like just fawning, and like suddenly you're like
Yeah.
it feels disgusting. It's
Because
so gross.
technically, even though you've done more game stuff, like Dragon Prince, and again, because you've done more game stuff than that, but like it was on Netflix at the time, right? So
Yeah,
like
yeah. So yeah,
people
you
see
could
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
would see that, or even just hearing the title art director,
Art director, right? Yeah.
people would immediately just shift the way they talk to me, and I'm just like, this feels gross.
Because
Like
art
I
directors
didn't,
also work in film sets. So yeah.
yeah. And anyone there, they're just like, oh, I could see you using you as a ladder to get
A
somewhere
ladder to do
else.
something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah,
and
I
then
think
like if you're walking on a sidewalk,
mhm.
most people in other places like they'll if this is a sidewalk, they'll go to the side. In
Right.
LA, they just stay in the center,
Walk right through
expecting
you.
you to go to the side.
Yeah.
So that explains LA pretty well. But I love the all the food, the culture,
Yeah,
the
it's a
variety. Like,
very culture heavy place, and especially with I think the life you live with your partner, like it was very, especially on the vegetarian stuff we talked about, and being a bit maybe neurodivergent, a bit colourful. Like it's definitely a city
oh
that
yeah,
embraces that. Yeah,
I the love just like dressing up and wearing the most ridiculous outfits, and or just
you
looking
get
like
away
a
with it in
random
LA.
like generated NPC walking outside, and like people would compliment you because very open in that way. And then yeah, it's really great or easier to be if you're vegetarian, vegan, or something like that.
Yeah,
So many options. You can be like, oh, do you want like uh, Korean food, but
Hmm.
the vegan version or whatever,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's just you can find a restaurant anywhere. So food is such a such an amazing thing in
Very
LA.
on par. Yeah. We're good like that in the UK. Well, Scotland specifically. I know Edinburgh and Glasgow are very. Scotland in general, I think, is one of the vegan capitals of Europe because we have
Oh,
so
really?
many. Yeah, we have
Oh,
so
that's
much stuff in
awesome.
here.
Oh, that's cool.
Guy I used to hang about with, he still runs a vegan cafe, but it's like vegan junk food. So he makes like these huge like burgers and fries loaded with stuff,
Yeah,
and it's
those are
all
always
vegan, all
fun.
plant
Yeah,
based. So
yeah.
that's why it's called rabbit food because he makes junk food from plants. So
That's fun.
yeah. But yeah, so LA. So I mean, but then you've moved the games because now you're where you are now. Obviously, Robert Entertainment's it's in Texas, right?
Yeah, so the Robot Entertainment, the studio is set up in Texas. We have like we call it Treehouse, like Hangout studio. Really, it's just like a few people hang out in there, work from there. But we'll do events and I'll come visit. But we're all over the country
The country, right?
and um, all over the world. Really, we have some people
International
in
workers as well.
Mexico. Yeah, we're international. Uh, like we've got East Coast, West Coast, North, South, and then also other
Any from like
countries.
Europe and UK and stuff like that, or
No one in Europe, UK. We'd be willing to work with people from there, but just we have just someone from South America right now. But in the past, other studios, I worked with lots of people from
yeah.
Europe and UK.
I think the remote culture is definitely like becoming more of a thing, like as COVID has
Oh, it's
shifted.
fantastic! Like, yeah,
Yeah, well,
I kind
even
of
you, because like you said, like you're not in Texas essentially. That's what we can say is
no,
yeah,
yeah. I'm I moved out of LA. I'm up in a mountain now and just working off the forest, and so it's I love
definitely your
the
vibes.
remote
Yeah,
thing. I don't really understand why there's this push to go away from remote now. Like I'm like I think the world's changed enough. We should just accept it and let people have more
I
time with
think
their
older
families.
studios, maybe people who have grown up with that culture in the '90s and 2000s, feel like
Oh
that's
yeah, it's really
the
hard for
only
them
way you
to let
can
go
be.
of it. Yeah,
Yeah,
but like our studio, everyone loves being remote. Everyone sees it as such a positive and kind of like it's the work life balance is so much better. Like you don't
well,
have to
no commute as
spend.
well, because like
Yeah,
even
the
commuting in LA
commute.
is a fucking nightmare. Yeah,
Yeah. Like when I was in LA, I would try to like move next to the studio so I could just walk there and be like 10 minutes or whatever. But remote is just like if you use communication like a Miro board or something, you can all communicate, jump on Discord. We have all the tools we need, and we get to spend so much more time with our loved ones, our pets, all those things too. Which to me, the older I get, the more important that becomes to me.
yeah. It's like everybody I know who works either for Riot or Blizzard has to move within 5 minutes walking distance of their studios because
Yeah,
yeah.
they kind of pulled that back in. Like I think they still have some remote people, but it I feel like that was really shitty of them to do. Like it felt like they
Blizzard particularly, I think they were really on top of that of like bringing people back in, but I think that might be changing now given the new management. I don't know. I don't know too much about it,
hopefully,
but
yeah, because it just seems to me it seems like it's a
older
waste
way
of
of
so
working.
many things. Like it costs more to
Especially when they
live.
have contractors who work internationally, like across in the UK and stuff like that, and in Europe. Like it,
Yeah,
I don't know what the need is for teams to be on site all the time. I mean, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. Like I think you can do so much of that where you are remote, and you eventually need some kind of human contact. So, like you say, you'll go to events or you'll go to things where there's going to be people in the studio, but you don't need it like every day. As
yeah,
long as you can get
yeah,
that fixed now and again, maybe once a month or something.
yeah. That's kind of what we do. We the studio flies me into Texas every once in a while. We get together and have like leads meetings or if there's like a big event where we're sort of like kicking something off or a launch party, things like that.
Because you're
Which
not bad from where you are. Like the flight to Texas was a couple hours or something.
yeah, it's just a couple hours, but I hate flying, so
Oh no, I'm not great either, but hey ho,
that's another story.
yeah. Um, so now you're a robot and you're doing your new project. So like, what did you feel like it was about the culture for robot that made you want to move?
I guess it was more I was looking for a new, fresh culture, and the friend that recommended me to go there, like I really trusted her kind of opinions and thoughts on it. She seemed really emotionally intelligent, and I was looking for a studio that really had very emotionally intelligent leaders, uh, people that they could they could talk about the difficult things with their teammates and resolve issues, interpersonal issues, and things like that. Like I've been at a lot of studios where it gets kind of brushed under the rug, and then being, I think I'm probably neurodivergent. Like
Hmm.
I kind of have a really hard time letting things that I think are just uh, hurt people or kind of harm people or mentally
Wrong,
or whatever.
essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, when things feel really wrong to me, I have such a hard time letting that go. Like
Yeah,
I
it's the justice
something
drive. We talked about this other day, like the whole
yeah,
thing of
like
like
there's
needing the
this
balance.
this a
Yeah,
strong sense of justice for things, and
yeah,
I really like to try to hire really a diverse group of people that can kind of bring all new ideas and stuff like that. It just felt like those people in a lot of previous places weren't really heard out for problems, planning, and things like that. So I wanted someone that I felt could, or a studio that I felt could really hear me out when I'm like, oh, hey, we have an issue here. And instead of just washing it under or conflict avoidance, face that problem
trying to
head.
tackle it head
Like,
on. Yeah.
yeah, face it head, face on face or whatever there.
Mhm.
Because to me, a lot of those interpersonal issues, they can start very small, but they kind of like
They grow.
cloud out like a mushroom cloud and kind of hang over you, and it just affects
I mean,
everything.
that's the whole reason that like Riot and Blizzard were going through what they were going through, because that stuff was
Yeah,
just ignored for so long. Like people just,
it's
yeah,
and the longer you ignore it, the worse it gets, the
yep,
worse it feels, and then like yeah, it's just so rough.
it's difficult. Yeah,
And
because you don't want to. I don't know, and maybe some people have this thing about. I mean, because a lot of the people who run these studios and a lot of people who were high up were nerds originally, or people who founded these studios because they wanted to make
yeah,
games.
they usually went up through the
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 ranks,
brackets
yeah,
and stuff, the
and then they
ranks and
maybe
whatnot.
haven't had to deal with conflict in a way that that most businesses would. Because I mean, like the thing is as well with I just talked with Darren the other day about how games essentially were born when I was too, right? So in the 80s, like gaming was becoming a thing. So
Yeah.
for an industry to prop up around that overnight and be where we are now, we're really lucky to have the jobs we have, I suppose. But at the
Oh
same
yeah,
time,
it's such a young industry.
yeah, so much is getting figured out. Like unions and like sexual harassment and HR and all that kind of stuff. Like that's it's
Yeah,
the growing pains of the industry is what we're going through at the moment. I feel
yeah.
that's the thing that
A
we're
lot of
getting.
the like the I feel like there's just like some social things even outside of gaming that I think could be need to be worked on to make working environments a better place for everybody too. But
Yeah.
gaming was seemed like they're lagging behind even further than everyone else.
When I got into the industry, I think years ago, I always had this idea that it was so open minded, and then because you make games and it was creative, that it would be
Yeah,
a place where people would feel safe and would be, it wouldn't be run like
yeah.
most businesses. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what my kind of thought early on was too. And I immediately, like some of the first studios, I ran into issues where it's like I'd have a cast of characters that were diverse, and they'd be like, "Well, let's remove all these characters that are diverse. Let's focus on all these white characters over here." And I'm just like, "Oh my god, like
yeah,
really?
yeah.
Are
I
you
know.
saying what I think you're saying to me?" And
Yeah,
sometimes it's like it's just mind blowing
yeah.
how like they try to act so nice about some of these things. It's just like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh,
It's
okay.
such a balance, though, I think, within games as well, because you want to be diverse, but not diverse for the sake of it. You want to make sure that
Yeah, you want
it's
to be authentic. Yeah.
you don't just
Yeah.
plot people in for the sake of like ticking that box, of like we are
Well, yeah,
diverse.
that's the thing too. I think a lot of people they assume when that's being pushed or whatever, but like when I'm thinking about it, I'm trying to represent the people that I know,
That work around you. Yeah.
yeah, like the people I work around, my friends, the people that live around me in LA, like all that type of stuff. Like I'm trying to represent what I see as humanity, and I think a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're forcing it and pushing it," but it's like, no,
It's
I
just the way
think
the
it,
world is. We don't live in like a really homogenous culture, unless you live in places like Japan, where like it's mostly Japanese people.
yeah,
And it's a thing like in most Western civilized worlds, especially places like LA, where it's a hub for just creativity in general, and
yeah,
everybody goes there to make their break into film or games or whatever.
exactly, yeah,
Yeah, you have people from all walks of life, all different genders, sexual
yeah, exactly.
orientations. So yeah,
And I think it's really important to represent those people in media so that the next generation can see themselves in media and see themselves so they can feel like they can reach out and either do that or
yeah.
feel more confident in themselves or feel less hated or whatever it is. I think just that representation is super
It's just that
important.
feeling of seeing the character on screen that represents you, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
that person can do it. So like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Like you and I, our whole lives, we've had endless amount of games that are we are represented in over and over and
yeah.
over again. So it's like I don't think we need to keep
Time for someone else to, to
yeah,
take the floor.
it's time for some other people to to
It's
have
like
representation.
it's like Bo Burnham when he done the inside joke, and he's like, about white people have had the floor for like 400 years, so maybe we should just shut
Yeah,
the fuck up.
exactly. Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't want to do that. It's like, but,
I'm bored.
yeah, I'm bored. Yeah, but it's one of these things where like, yeah, it is 100% like oh my god, just thinking about that song as well, where he sings about the Aladdin costume. So I'm gonna go home and burn it. Or not burn it? Should I burn it? I don't know what I should do. But
Yeah.
Yeah, but as a thing where like it's a thing that needs to be addressed and it has to have a balance. But again, it's the overcorrection of like the industry being so young and try to get things done and really like force those things in only because for so long the doors have been shut to that stuff. So people are trying to really just
Yeah,
push it through as much as they can just now until then it
yeah.
eventually balances out again.
And for
So
me,
yeah.
it's not even like I when I hire, I try to think of that same aspect of diversity. So I want to represent it on my team and
Mhm.
externally. Sometimes you can't always do that. Like I inherited a team more so when I moved to Robot Entertainment, and they're all fantastic. Like I've really gotten to know them, and it's been really fantastic. But like even that was kind of a new experience for me because I most of the studios I've worked at, I started as like the artist, and then it's like okay, now build the team and hire everybody, and interview everybody, so you really get to know and get to know everybody in the opposite way where they're getting to know you and you're getting to know them. But in this situation, I was kind of like tossed into the mix, and it's like, well, here's your team. I might have to hire a few people here and there, and but yeah, so that was another unique experience with moving to Robot, where it felt like it was just another challenge I hadn't faced before.
And now, the way the landscape's looking with things like AI and obviously like, we talked about early on about how that kind of sits and, people with portfolios and I'm just wondering how the games landscape's going to look in the next couple of years and thinking about, what will be the skills that are needed and I think it's interesting with the tech sector because I mean tech in general because half the jobs that will be needed in the next 5 years don't even exist now. Like things just prop up because they become a
Yeah,
job out of necessity. Um, Even like people who are now cultural experts that work on teams because they need the aspect of something representing the game. But even the concept, like it's a thing where I feel like the traditional skills are really what you should be focusing on all the time. Like in anything you do, like it is always foundations in what you do, like perspective,
yeah,
anatomy,
yeah.
color, composition, all that kind of stuff.
It
I
expands
feel
your
like
mind, really.
yeah, like the most successful people I've seen in every industry and every part of the game sector are people who like really focus on and double down on those huge key skills early on. Like those are the people that get noticed really quickly. And Tim's, like you said, you're walking evidence of like everybody who always asks me, every student ever comes to me ever in the last 5 years is how do I get noticed? How do I make a portfolio that gets noticed? And I'm like, like literally just you make stuff that is good. If your
Yeah, you
portfolio
make
is good enough.
stuff. A lot of times, I think the mistake I see is kind of like people are trying to make stuff that appeals to other people, and I think that's or
Oh my
appeals to
god,
like
yeah.
they're trying to be too
Well, yes.
broad and open to it, and that ties into the social media thing too, where like you'll be like, oh,
Yeah,
this got a lot of likes, so I'm gonna do this now, and it's like that can
100%.
lead you into places that you end up not really liking what you're doing,
You
and
have to be true to yourself. You really
yeah,
have to be.
exactly. The most impactful stuff that I felt like I've done is the stuff where the personal projects
Mhm.
where I just went off on a, over here and started building a story and was really cohesive about it and tried to just keep building that up. And it's my own thing. And it was that's what got me noticed. And I think that applies to like everyone's portfolio to where it's like you don't want to necessarily copy what everyone else is doing. You want to do something unique to you, something that pulls from your individuality and stands out. And I think that's what separates us, from
Well,
the AI and
storytelling in
everything too.
general. I mean, I feel like storytelling is something that really isn't like grained into people's work, but like so much of the stuff, like the Sanctuary Tomb, or you've done like stuff like Cabin in the Woods, like older pieces, obviously, but like it feels like a page out of a book. Like you could look at that and say, "Oh, I wonder who lives in the cabin? Where's the tomb?
Yeah. What happened before? What happened after? And
Yeah, like that
what's
stuff."
happening now? And,
Yeah, even to like the little person, big structure is a trope, obviously, but like
yeah,
the storytelling aspect of someone looking into a piece and being like, "I wonder what's going on like behind the scenes." Like when even like in the cabin in the woods, if you even had like a little guy with a torch at one point, and then people are like, "Oh, like someone's going to investigate the cabin." Like
yeah,
that stuff is what then brings in art directors because they're like, it was like I'm going to have at this point, I can kind of announce it, but Jason Schreier is coming on, and he worked on Blue Eye Samurai, and the
hmm
reason that he really got that gig was obviously because his work was incredible at the time, but there was so much story depth in what he was making at the time as well, and that was what really drew Netflix to him to make that project
yeah.
because he
A
had a lot of
unique
that stuff
vision.
figured
Yeah,
out. Yeah, yeah, it's something I think missing from most modern portfolios, and it depends who you want to work in as well because even within concept design and 2D, there are so many jobs, between storyboards and keyframe design to like the blue sky stuff. But then if you want to do concept design, it's like you've got more prop stuff, environment stuff. There's a whole like deconstruction happening there with the stuff you build. But
Yeah,
everything
but
you do
every
should be
layer
true.
of that should have story. It should
Yes.
have purpose, meaning,
And should be
story.
true to you as a person.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, one of these things is that I feel like is if you're not really pushing that button early on, when you get to the roadblocks of crunch, if you have to go through it, or like projects that are really a bit longer, or maybe it isn't something you really want to work on, like if you have that ability to be doing something at least you really enjoy or that speaks to you as an artist, um, that will really like help you through those harder moments. Like I listened to an interview with Lady Gaga when she was on a radio show. There was a clip, it was only a couple of minutes long, which she talked about how artists don't really even need like discipline or the hard work aspect of what they do. What they need is perspective. It's the thing where you need to have a vision of like what you want to be as an artist, as a person, and that will hopefully keep you on track. Because if you jump from one thing to the other for what people like or what people think you should be doing, which I have been guilty of for so long, try to copy the Last of Us 2 sketches that came out at one point and try to learn Blender because everybody was learning it. Like,
Yeah.
you have to really sit there and ask yourself, do I want to fucking learn Blender? Do I even want to learn Blender? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you really like, I went back into Maya and done that whole thing the last couple of weeks because I was like, well, I'm good at Maya and I'm really quick at it. So why the fuck should I just not use that? I mean, it's like, just do whatever. Like, I know a woman who runs a studio called Athena Studios, and it's like she does all her concept art in Unreal. But she was like, I was so sick of like drawing, I didn't really want to do that, but I knew I was good at 3D and I really loved Unreal Engine. I was really quick at it. So I was like, fuck it, I'll just make
Yeah.
concepts in that. Whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, for me, I struggled with perspective here and there, so I used a lot of 3D, and then the 3D helped me learn perspective better, and I
yep.
inevitably just like walked away from the 3D and stuck with 2D for the most part. But I'll probably go back as well. But a lot of that was more chosen to kind of fulfill that goal that I had up here.
Mm-hmm.
That to me, it's always an ever moving goal, but having that goal and kind of sticking to that, being like not like wavering maybe to trends as much and kind of flip flopping, and that's always the most like responses and impact I've gotten has always been the stuff where I've really just like been true to myself. And
I mean, it's the most common complaint you see with people with portfolios, how you'll look at a portfolio and you'll see like a bunch of environments because obviously this art station thing, and then like, some people are like, oh, that's great. Do you want to be an environment artist? And they're like, no, not really. Like,
yeah, that's always
yeah.
Only put work you love in your portfolio. Like
Yeah.
it's
Because as soon as you get an offer to get hired for someone, and people are like, "Oh, so it's an environment work in your portfolio. Do you want to get paid for it?" And they're like, "Not really." Like, I'll
yeah.
probably take the gig because it pays money, but, and then you end up with more professional stuff that you've done as environment, and then you're even further in the rabbit hole.
Exactly.
You can't go back now. Because even I was listening to Adam Duff talk, and he was talking about, Lucid Pixel. He was talking about he has a mentee at the moment, and she was like, "Yeah, I really want to do some creature and character work. Like that's the whole thing I want to do." And then she's like, "Well, why have you got environment stuff in your portfolio?" And she's like, "Oh, because environment work is it's probably where you get the most work, and it's probably how I'll get hired the quickest." And he was like, "All right, well, if you want to do environment stuff, like I can give you Tyler Edlund's number and like give him a call because he's obviously the master at what he does there. But like, yeah, there's no point like menteeing with me if you want, because I'm a creature artist and a character
Yeah,
artist.
exactly.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, so it's not going to
Unless
make
you're shifting directions and you're going
yeah.
creature stuff. Yeah.
And she was like, "Oh yeah," but then I really wanted to character, and he's like, "Oh okay, then." It's like it's the thing of like I chased it for years, and also we've been friends for a long time, and I'm always shifting the goalpost of like what will get me hired quickest. And
Yeah.
nobody really, even not me, have sat down and been like, "What do you want to do, Gordon? Like, what do you want to do?"
I think that's I always my saying is slow and steady gets the spaghetti, and have that goal and just keep chipping away at it, and it feels slow at the time. It feels slow at the time, but if you just keep going towards it, you'll get there. And it's so easy to get fall off track and be like, oh, I'm gonna go do this or go do that. And although right now I feel like I'm in a little bit of one of those spots where I'm really interested in this thing over here, and this thing over here, and this thing over here. So maybe something's new on the horizon for me. We'll see.
Yeah, it's one of these things where I think you try to fill the blank space in your life with something interesting because you don't want to maybe sit in the emptiness because it feels like a bit like too dark because you're like, oh, I'm not really doing something I can. Because I feel like I talked about this with not even the neurodivergent stuff, but even being a creative, right? Being a creative person. I watched a podcast where somebody talked about how if you don't fill that space with work or fill that space with being creative, you overanalyze your life to the point you'll start to invent these scenarios in your head, and then you spiral like down this hole of every worst case scenario. But I was watching it and I was like, oh shit, like that's totally what happens.
yeah. The like there's that innate need to create, and then if I don't do that, like I
You
don't feel that
spiral.
great. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You
I
just
just
deeper and deeper
yeah,
down the hole, and you're like, oh
feel a
yeah,
little
and
empty if I don't
and
do
at one
that.
point the
Yeah.
world's going to end and the sun's going to envelop the planet, and like, oh shit, you're like, get me out of here! What the fuck am I doing?
Yeah, yeah, no,
Mm.
it's easy to fall into that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
for
Need
me,
someone to
like
pull you back out
I've
of it.
been
Yeah.
branching out of my creative fulfillment too. I want like a hobby that I don't get paid for
Right.
as well. So
Well, that's why you
music's
said you're
been
doing music as well, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I've got a piano as well. I just haven't really used it in a while. But like, I do want to learn music. But it feels like until I conquer the molehill that is, or the mountain that is my creative career in arts, like what I'm doing just now, like until I've really got that like settled, I don't feel like I can move
Oh
any
yeah,
more
totally.
things. Yeah.
I agree with that. Like I feel like I'm in a spot where I just want to branch out and evolve in some other
Yeah.
directions, and
I mean,
music's
if I'm
something that's
honest with
always
myself and the
curious.
stuff I want to do, the thing I want to do, I don't think is the thing that would ever get me hired. But that said, everybody I know who's ever gotten a cool job is like, well, I just done the thing I really enjoyed, and eventually somebody
I
hired me.
Slow and steady, man. Get the
Yeah,
spaghetti. Just keep like you can kind of turn anything into a career if you're dedicated
good
enough
enough
to
to
it.
yeah.
And it's a lot of times it's more like specific and unique rather than generalized. Like games that are successful, the ones that are really good are the ones that are specific visions intended for a group of people and
Niche.
just
Yeah.
like yeah niche stuff that really identifies with those that group of people. If you
I
try to
mean,
go
even
too
Orcs Must
expansive,
Die, like it's not like Call of Duty where it's like this mainstream appeal, but like there is a probably really dedicated following to that
oh
game because
yeah,
it's still
yeah,
around. So yeah, it's
yeah, it's I mean it's a unique combination of like third person action and like tower
tower
defense.
defense. Yeah,
Yeah. And I
yeah.
don't see too many tower defense games at least set up that way. So I think it's a
There's not. Yeah, the last one I played that was really good was a VR one where literally you would go into the level with giant hands and you would place the turrets
oh
on
really? Oh, that's
things
really
with your.
fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I've
like those
been
interactable things like the VR stuff like that. Yeah.
yeah, I've got a VR headset. I've been playing around a little bit, but I
Oh
don't
yeah, I just got a
necessarily.
Quest 3. It's literally
Yeah, that's what I've got too. Yeah, I
chilling on
don't.
my.
I have a hard time staying in VR though because it's so heavy, and
I need
also
to get
I
lenses
get
for it. I
motion
need
sick.
to. There's a company that makes custom lenses, so if you wear glasses, you can get lenses that
That's
just yeah. So they just literally slot onto the headset. You just
oh
push them on, and then you don't have to wear glasses in VR. You can just put it on your
oh
head.
that'd be nice. Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like it always like squishes your glasses to your face, and then I get like
That's why I want to get the lenses
you
because yeah,
little oil in your glasses corner, and you're just like,
yeah,
oh, gotta clean my
yeah,
glasses again.
yeah. But VR is interesting because like there is an almost untapped potential in that industry right now because there's not a lot of great content. Um, yeah, one I would
There's a lot
recommend
that
for
can be
you.
done though.
Well, if you've got the Quest 3, I would recommend Demio because that's a huge game. So Demio is it's like a tabletop board game thing, but
Hmm.
like you literally are in someone's basement, but you can zoom in and go right into the board and move your pieces individually. But like
Oh,
it's like a
that's
board
cool.
game where you move people, you roll dice, and then you attack essentially. But it's done so well. Like that, there's a whole culture and community behind it. They even have like little hangouts in the game. You can now they made this thing called Heroes Hangout where it's like a old school like board game shop you go into. You can all
Hmm.
hang out there with your friends. We need to play at one point. We'll definitely need to
We'll
play
check
it.
it out. Yeah. Well, I've got the set. We should definitely
Yeah,
play.
because you can also there's a figure painting thing in the back room. You can paint figures like little like figures from the game, like
Yeah.
trolls and stuff.
Oh, like
Uh,
actually. Oh, that's so cool.
yeah,
That's
yeah, like airbrushes and
I
paintbrushes and
used to.
stuff and
That was one of. I think that's one of the reasons I ended up in games because I used to paint little figures
measures.
and
Yeah,
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 they're lead
yeah,
though, so I hope
yeah, yeah.
that's doesn't
Not
affect
great.
me in
Yeah.
the future.
But yeah, Demio is has all that stuff. But then the actual board game itself is great because yeah, it's like you pick from different classes like warlock, wizards, whatever, and
Ah,
barbarians. Move them about the board, but the board sits in front of you, and you can move about the board obviously to see it. But
that's
if you
really
do it in
cool.
AR, because the MetaQuest 3 has the AR function, you can
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
place the board in your room and then walk about the
The
board,
AR things
and
are pretty. I like some of that stuff. Is pretty cool. It
it's
seems like
really
the
advanced. Yeah,
VR would be perfect for like a. I don't know if you remember the God Sims used to be really popular, like black and
there's a
white
bunch of
stuff
them.
like
So
that.
they just launched Tropico on Quest 3.
Okay,
Which is like the old kind of God Sim, like I don't know. Tropico's a weird thing. I can't remember where it falls. It's almost like the Civilization
I
type
feel like
game,
it's like almost like between like an RTS and like a. I haven't played it too
really
much,
strategy
but it's
stuff.
like
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But like yeah, no, I mean it's funny that like there's so many. The Quest 3 is it really isn't tapped, but there's been really good games that come out recently. Like even like Breachers, because I used to play a lot of Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, and
Hmm.
there's basically Breachers is that for VR,
Oh,
like going
cool.
through doors and windows and stuff like that with guns and shooting other people.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, Quest in general is, and also for painting, like there's There's Gesture VR, which is life drawn for
Oh, really? Oh, I haven't seen
Quest.
that
Yeah, yeah.
one.
So literally, you get up like something like 50 models. You can flick through, but they sit on a
Oh,
stand, and you get an easel and a pencil, and you can draw
oh,
with it.
that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I need to send you. So there's Gesture VR. There's Vermilion, which is a painting app, and you get a whole thing of paints and brushes, and you can paint. And the brush engine's really good. It's really good for like feeling like paint on paper and
Actual
stuff.
paint, yeah. I've done like tilt brush and like some of the sculpting ones and stuff, but
Yeah, because there's Gravity Sketch and stuff like that. But like, yeah, Vermilion and Gesture VR are good because they're 2D based. So like the Gesture is just pencil and paper, like drawing, life drawing stuff.
just on 2D. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You get
Yeah, most of the other ones are like all
yeah.
full 3D.
But
I
it's
even
hard
played
though
like a
because you hold the easel with the left one and you paint or draw with the right.
oh,
But
so you're
it's
kind of
like
like
yeah, but you don't get the feedback obviously of like paper. So it's like
yeah.
you're trying to guess. But then because of the haptics, because of the vibration stuff, it kind of you feel when the pen hits. But that Gesture VR and Vermilion are really two of the best. Because also they're co-op, so you can actually, if you both have the headset, you can sit in those games and do drawing or painting
You
with
need
each
like
other.
a physical device that you just like have like a pen that you scratch on, just so it's like
Yeah,
you're
essentially,
like in
people have
AR or
actually done it
something.
where they've put like a board on top of the left one, and then you will feel it like stop like to draw. But it's a weird thing, yeah. But it's kind of hard to judge. But yeah, yeah. So the art things are there definitely. But anyway, we're digressing. So so yeah, so you've
Pretty
caught up.
easy.
You're a robot now, and yeah, we've talked about like AI. We've talked about portfolio and things that mean much to you. So I think that's a good place to wrap up. I think
Yeah,
we've
yeah.
kind of
Oh,
covered.
there was some other things I've been working on that I was going to mention too. Like I've
All
got
right, yeah, yeah.
one of the big time sinks that I've been just kind of sinking all my time into is taking all of my art, making new art, and then making this whole like art lore book where it's
Oh,
sort
your
of
book, yeah, of course, yeah, yeah.
written kind of in done from the perspective of someone in one of my worlds.
Okay.
And then I almost want it to be kind of like I don't know when you're a kid, did you ever get those books where it's like dragon books or like castle books and you'd get in like just like sink into it and
Hmm.
they're really powerful and meaningful to me when I was younger and I
Yep.
kind of want to take that and create one out of my world and everything
Right. Yeah.
which could inevitably turn into something else. But for me, I think a book sounds like a fun project. Like I want something kind of physical to outcome from this, and
Yeah. I'm doing
it's
something.
pretty far along. So
Yeah, I'm doing something similar to that. I think we talked about this point where I'm playing. If you guys you'll hear about it now, obviously you might even see it at this point in the podcast, but I'm filling a sketchbook with drawings from Legend of Zelda in the sense that I'm playing the game and then filling in a
and
journal.
then drawing as
Yeah.
you go through.
Like
Oh, that's
from the
really fun.
perspective of like Link and what he's like he finds the book in the shrine
Oh,
and then
oh, that's
he's
so
writing
cool. Yeah,
like
yeah.
when he comes across stuff he's drawing it and being like, oh this I found this thing today when I was walking. So like yeah,
Oh,
I'm
that's
doing
awesome. Yeah, that's kind of how mine's done. Like I have like there's like a character that this other character is following that's in the world and sort of
yeah.
kind of this uh, figuring out like what the story is and then letting people kind of interpret that. It's
They
been really
done
fun.
there was a painter I knew done that at one point where he made a whole book basically on like because people had really done like Earth to death, but he talked about how like when painters used to go around the world, it used to be a thing where they would find they would paint what was in front of them. They go around the world and paint what was in front of them. Then photography became a thing. But he tried to do it where the book was basically about someone landed on an alien planet and then they painted everything they saw on the alien planet. George something, he's a British painter, but very famous for sci-fi novels and stuff like that. But he done a whole book like that. But yeah, I'm doing it from the perspective of like Link just walking around the world and then finding
Oh,
things and
that's
then drawing.
awesome. Well, I look forward
Yeah,
to seeing
so
that.
yeah. But then yeah, so you've got your book, and then like, are you doing anything with your game also? Like your card game, Moss? Is that still
Cycles of Moss. Yeah, that's on a pause right now. There was some differencing of opinions with my business partner, so
technical difficulties?
I'll
Yeah.
yeah, technical difficulties. I probably if I redo it, I might do it as a different type of game, but using the similar art and stuff like that. But I haven't decided where I'm going with that. Um, I do have some ideas around it. I just haven't like had time to
Executed on them yet? Yeah, because you're also
execute them
working a
yet.
full time job, so it totally makes sense. Yeah, you're
Yeah,
trying
and
to
I just moved too, so I'm
settling again,
focusing on that, settling in a lot, and kind of just putzing
chilling.
around with different things here and there. Still
Awesome.
drawing, but not as much as I want to. I want to get back into doing
I'm
some
the
more
same. I'm
sketching.
trying. This is why I'm doing the Link project because I'm trying to like force myself to sit down and do something cool, drawing wise, like just
Yeah,
to get the muscle working. So yeah,
yeah, I ebb and flow because I'll get burned. I usually burn myself out is what happens. I go
because you
too
draw so
hard for
much.
too
Yeah,
long, draw too much, which it's hard to find that balance because like when you're on that cusp of like, oh, this feels really good. I'm drawing tons, loving all I'm making. And then you get to that, like, the edge of the black hole, and it sort of pulls you in, and you get stretched out, and you feel way burnt out. So I'm really bad at repeating that, so I'm trying to be more balanced.
Yeah, I think it's also the thing where, like, in modern day culture, you feel like you should be doing, like, every part of your day should be filled with something. Like, doing something.
And that doesn't have to be true. Like, now I'm let birds show up outside my window, and sometimes I'll just sit there and watch birds show up at my window. And
you need to get one of those feeders. Oh my god, there's one where it's like you stick it to the glass, but then it's like a little box that goes out the way, but then it's a clear box.
Yeah. I want to get those because we've got our 2 cats, and they love watching the birds, and I want to get one where it sticks out.
Yeah.
Or there's one where it sticks in, and then the birds will come into the window and then, like, eat the food and stuff.
Essentially, yeah, like you put a little bird food in the side, and then have to fly inside it, and then or it's like it's opaque on the outside, so it keeps the light out, but then the glass is obviously flush with the glass, so when they come in, you can still see them. Someone done that last year, and 2-way
mirror.
They filled it forever, and then the birds ended up coming and making a nest and laying eggs and everything, and like filmed them, like the chicks hatching and everything. I was like, oh my god, incredible! Like making little mini nests in their windows. It was incredible. So yeah. Awesome. Cool. Right. Okay. So if you guys have made it to this point in the podcast, thanks for staying on and listening to us rant about fucking everything. I don't know what we've not talked about at this point. Like I say, Kane, AI, VR. But yeah,
maybe
like I think
it's podcast. Huh?
I mean, yeah. Who knows? Something might be cooking in the works in the future. We don't know. So me and Tim have talked about doing another podcast. We're not sure about what it's going to be or what it's going to happen, but I think it would be a cool idea because we have a lot of the same mindsets on things, so it would be cool.
Yeah.
Have a back and forth. So. But yeah, so if you've got to this point, thanks for listening. Thanks for Tim for coming on again and giving up his time. I know this is your lunch hour and it's really into your work, but it was great that I got to catch up.
Yeah, it's fantastic chatting, and if anyone wants to find me online and stuff, I'm at Random Spirits at pretty much all the social medias, and like timkaminski.com for most stuff. So usually pretty easy to find. But
I'll leave all the links and stuff down below. You guys can find them pretty easily enough. So
technology.
Check them out. Yeah. So again, definitely for hanging out. Thanks to you guys for hanging out and for Tim for talking. And we'll speak to you guys later. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.